Hi, Gillian.
Hi, Natalie.
So nice to have you on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I actually think it's going to be very relevant for a lot of people. And so let's start by just giving you a chance to introduce yourself. Who are you and what's important to you?
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, I'm Gill. I am an ACC level coach as of December last year. So, just fresh out of the accreditation process. And I love to learn. I am a very curious person. And so I enjoy opportunities to step outside of my comfort zone, learn new things. I'm particularly passionate about social justice and neurodiversity, which we'll talk about a bit today. Looking forward to that conversation. And a little bit of the more formal kind of LinkedIn bio stuff about me. I have worked in the nonprofit sector for almost 10 years in various roles as a facilitator, as a speaker, in different kind of organizational management, and currently as a coach for neurodivergent folks who are transitioning into the workforce or navigating different kinds of professional or performance challenges. And I also work with managers who want to develop their skills in managing neurodiverse teams. And just a bit about my kind of positionality and my place in the world. I'm a 33-year-old white settler cis woman. I'm married, and my spouse is certainly one of the best parts of my life. I live in the suburbs of Ontario, and I love to read thrillers, and I enjoy campfires and hanging out with my golden retriever, Joey.
Joey, cute.
Yeah.
That's so good. Thanks for that. Wow. So I really want to, I think, start by saying the things that are important to you and the work that you're doing is so, I think, important to the world of coaching and to the world in general. So I'm curious about social justice as a starting point for what does that mean to you? Like social justice, what is important to you about that?
That's such a great question. It really came from when I was younger. When I was around 12, there was this moment when I learned that gay people couldn't get married. And that was this turning point in my life of realizing that things weren't fair, that things weren't just, and that I wasn't okay with it. And that has really developed over time into my love of learning and, of course, that connection to really caring about and loving other people. And the way that I see social justice is it's connected to that, to the concept of community care. It's how we advocate for ourselves and how we advocate for others to live in a more fair and just society. And through, how that shows up in my coaching is in particular more recently with coaching neurodivergent individuals is, connecting with people to better understand their worth, their value. And I think that's so deeply connected to social justice, because when people recognize their value and their worth in the world and that place that they can take up and the space they can take up, that is justice, that is, resistance, that is, it's such a powerful realization in the way that we can show up
Mm.
and the way that we can show up for others, not just ourselves. And so I think that there's a real interconnection there. And I think that when people realize their worth and their value, they can better advocate, and they can better accept their own needs as well, which I certainly see as a key theme in the work that I do with many of the people that I coach.
Hmm. Whoa, that's such a beautiful topic. And also, it brings me to allyship and the Coach Connect we recently had in our community, led by Erwin Bess, who's just amazing. And so I wonder, what do you think? Because I'm hearing you say advocate, right? Advocate for people as a community, which is really important. What do you think the role of allyship is in coaching?
Hmm. Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think for what's coming to mind for me is it's about learning at least in part. It's learning about other people's lived experiences and really becoming more aware of other people's lived experiences and how other people move through the world.
Hmm.
And that's, connected to the, what the ICF describes, being aware of other people's cultures and environments. And when we can better understand how other people's lived experiences differ from our own, I believe that we become better at holding space for their stories and for their experiences non-judgmentally.
Hmm.
And we can be more curious about them. And so I think when I think of coaching kind of in a vacuum, so if a coach were to, coach perfectly and to be able to suspend all judgment and be just so deeply curious, which of course is a skill we all actively seek to cultivate, but as hard as we try, there are still judgments and moments and things like that. And so it's a constant learning. But the more that we learn about other people's experiences, and that could include the experience of, racialized people, learning about the experience of Black women, learning the experience of autistic individuals, and really understanding the differences there and the nuances, we can better suspend that judgment. We can become more curious, and I think when we do that, we can be better at questioning certain thoughts or things like that when people are having certain thoughts that might be rooted in ableism or rooted in racism or misogyny, or these internalized kind of beliefs that we have about ourselves that are from society, from different forms of oppression and things like that, then we can better question those thoughts when we become aware of them, and we can better support people in identifying what's true and what is a socialized construct, what is a form of internalized ableism or something like that.
Hmm. Oh, so interesting. And I'm thinking about, the should detox that we do in our coach certification. And I think from what I understand, your focus is neurodivergent,
Mhm.
individuals who you're coaching. Wondering, like, what do you see, if any, the difference between coaching neurodivergent and coaching neurotypical? And the reason I ask is because a lot of people say they want to specialize in this area.
Mhm.
What do they need to know about being a coach in this space? I guess is the question.
That is such a great question because it's really exploded over the
Mhm.
past, I can't say for sure, but it appears that it's really blown up, at least in the last 5 years, but perhaps it's the last 10 or so. Being ADHD coaching or, autism coaching, which is great. I mean, it's awesome. And through my research, that it's actually an interesting question because I came to CCA because I got this job at a nonprofit to coach neurodivergent individuals as they transition to new roles into employment. And I had never coached before, and I had very minimal experience formally working with neurodivergent individuals. Of course, we all, work and live with neurodivergent people, whether we know it or not. But in my work of just trying to learn as I go, that led me to Canada Coach Academy to gain more formalized training and skills, because I really wanted to serve people far better than I was. And so that's kind of the first part of my answer is, of course, formal coach training. I think ICF coaching and the competencies are a wonderful framework for supporting both neurotypical and neurodivergent individuals. And then the second part is really learning about the community. So the neurodivergent community is really really vibrant and strong and cohesive in a lot of ways. And so that's where I learned a lot, was learning from autistic people, learning from ADHDers, learning from people with dyslexia and different learning disabilities. I have a learning disability myself. But if you're looking to be a coach in this area, I don't necessarily think that you need to be neurodivergent. I think people might disagree with me on that, and I think that's okay. But I think really learning from neurodivergent individuals themselves and learning about the neurodivergent brain, so how it works differently, and understanding some of the lived experiences of different neurodivergent folks is so important, because like I was saying before, I think that's where you can really improve on suspending the judgment, because you may be hearing about people who are struggling in more significant ways than neurotypical clients with self-motivating or with impulsivity and with really adhering to certain goals that they're setting, and may have unique challenges that you may not be seeing with some of your neurotypical clients. And so really understanding some of those experiences, learning from those lived experiences, blogs, LinkedIn, of course, TikTok and Instagram are well known right now for people learning about neurodiversity. And I think that's very positive, is there's people sharing their own stories. People are learning about themselves and sharing their experiences with others. And I think that's so valuable, because I think, as a final note, sometimes people are expressing this belief that self-diagnosis or this seeming increase in the prevalence of neurodiversity is an issue or a problem. And I personally do not see it that way. And I also think, as coaches, we need to recognize that regardless of whether there's a formal diagnosis or, there's basically a formal diagnosis or, kind of the formalities fulfilled there, how someone sees themselves and how someone is understanding their experience is going to be the most important thing regardless. And so understanding that story is going to be so important. But ultimately, the foundational skills of coaching are going to be applied to a neurotypical person and a neurodivergent person, and benefit them. So there's going to be no change necessarily to your coaching practice. Perhaps the tools that you use and your understanding of this person's lived experience, again, can help you suspend judgment. But your coaching practice and the tactics that we use and the methodologies in our approach are going to be virtually the same.
Well, it's good to hear you say that, because I, for one, believe that the framework that we offer can support any conversation if we're using the skills and competencies within the framework, right? But yet I also hear so many people say, well, do you have a program that specializes in diversity, or do you have a program that specializes in whatever? Like, could be menopause coaching, could be grief coaching, could be any of those things, right? And I just want to say, like, it's important to be able to serve your niche and your client base in a way that you feel confident. But I also want to say that if you're really following the coaching framework as it's meant to be, which is really empowering and client-centered, the framework is what you need. right? The coaching approach is what you need, the mastery and the skill of coaching, and then you can coach anyone. And if that extra knowledge you feel it helps you to feel confident, that's okay. But you don't actually bring any of that into the coaching, right? Because you're creating space around someone for someone, not bringing in your opinions, your advice, your your point of view, right? So it's really neat to hear you say that, and to say it so clearly and well, and how it's been, your experience, your lived experience.
Mhm.
And yet I do have a question about, so going back to the shoulds and the should detox, and I'm fairly certain from my own experience, there's a lot of shoulds in that space, right? Because you should be able to get this concept. You should be able to learn these things the way that everyone else is. You should be able to organize yourself the way everyone else does. Like, there must be a lot of shoulds in these conversations. How is that for you? Like, how are you handling that?
Absolutely. Yes, completely agree. It's really interesting, and like to what you're saying, we really, with the framework of coaching, we can coach anyone. And it really stood out to me when I was reading the Heart of Laser Focused Coaching. The author suggested that really all coaching is kind of could be boiled down to self-esteem coaching,
Mhm.
and supporting people with their self-esteem. And I don't want to be reductive, and I think that they may have had qualifiers to that, but that was one interesting statement that they made. And so absolutely, with like I should be able to be able to take notes effectively in this meeting the way that I'm expected to. I should be able to manage my time and prioritize effectively the way that everybody else can. And we're navigating a lot of shame. Absolutely. People with disabilities are constantly trying to show up in their environments in ways that are similar of non-disabled bodies and non-disabled people around them. And there can be shame associated with not being able to do that. And we're often, I find that my conversations when I'm someone comes and they're having a performance challenge, they're struggling with PowerPoint or some sort of training or skill development or something like that. And when we really get into the conversation, I'm learning things like they struggle with asking for help because of the shame associated with believing that they should be able to do something without that kind of support, that needing support is the problem. And and a lot of our conversations are around navigating those feelings of being able to advocate, being able to request accommodations, being able to, because it's such a barrier to learning about our own brains and our own bodies and our own existence and how we show up in the world, if we believe that we should be showing up in a certain way. And it's a real struggle, I think, in particular for disabled people, but for any individual who is looking to someone else and comparing ourselves and being like, I should be able to show up that way, that puts up this barrier to us being able to show up in our own way, and to recognize that that could be okay, and that could be suitable, that could be acceptable. And when I'm working with people who are perhaps experiencing that struggle, if we're not able to even recognize our own needs and appreciate and accept our own needs and our own way of showing up, then we're already one step behind being able to ask for support and being able to ask for help, because we can't even identify what we need help with, because we don't think, we're not okay with needing that help. And so those shoulds are a huge part of the work that I do with people. And then the other side is I also work with managers. So people who typically identify as neurotypical, they are managing neurodivergent people and neurodiverse teams. And in that role, in that capacity, I'm often providing more of a consulting position than I am coaching, but certainly use some of those skills. But that's where I'm, supporting managers in kind of questioning those assumptions and those beliefs we have about productivity, and how we can support people in the workplace, and what are acceptable needs and what are acceptable supports, which I think is really particularly interesting right now as we navigate an evolving workforce. There's lots of talk about generational differences, which I do often see as quite blanket generalizations, but there's interesting information there. And one interesting point is that Gen Z we're seeing upwards of 50% of this younger generation identifying as neurodivergent. And this is we're going to
Wow.
see, yeah, it's a huge number. Half of people identifying as neurodivergent, we're going to, we're going to start seeing people in the workplace who have different needs, and different adjustments and accommodations, and different supports are going to be required there.
Wow. And so I guess it leads me to wonder, what do you notice is the opportunity for coaching versus another type of supporting professional that would typically go into schools for young people, or I don't know what kind of support would exist in organizations, but like what is the difference that coaching can make in this space?
I love that question. And just, right off the bat, I don't work with people usually under the age of like early 20s, right? Because I'm working generally with people in the workforce who are like transitioning into employment from university. I rarely even work with students in post-secondary. And so my experience with young people and what that could look like is non-existent. It's not just
Right.
limited, it's non-existent. And so I do not know how that could be reflected in that population necessarily. But I think that coaching and these coaching skills are, I use them all the time. I find myself sharing common coaching questions with managers and with fellow people who are wanting to be better communicators with anyone, of course, as we know, but certainly with neurodivergent individuals, because for neurodivergent people who think and problem solve and communicate in different ways, we want to, the best way to really support anyone, because we're not always going to know when someone's neurodivergent or has any sort of different lived experience from ourselves, having those conversations coming from a place of curiosity and dropping assumptions and leaving those behind, I think that's valuable as a baseline. But it's when we're working with neurodivergent individuals, it's even more valuable, because it's really the assumptions that we have about other people and the things that we're not curious about and that we're just jumping into that is really causing a lot of the communication barriers and communication gaps and misunderstandings. And so it's leading with this curiosity and these questions that I think is so valuable. This is where this impact is going to have, and this is where I want to impart these kinds of skills and strategies with the people that I work with, because especially when it comes to performance management, I've noticed in my experience, people make a lot of assumptions about why people are performing or not performing in a certain way. And that's where I see such a huge opportunity for coaching is in that area, because I speak with managers and they're like, oh, I think that they're just unmotivated. I think that they're, they're just not able to do this. And, asking like, what, what have they said? What kind of conversations have you had with them? What have you asked them? Where can we, start to be curious and have these real conversations, these real more coaching type conversations with
Mhm.
a colleague, with a team member, with someone that we manage, and that's where I think that coaching skills can have a tremendous impact, because I see people making assumptions all over the place, and it's very inefficient and very ineffective. So I think I think that the impact can be huge there.
I was just smiling because the whole, this person, it must be unmotivated, is a very classic way of deflecting, responsibility for motivating people, right?
Yeah.
Because somebody who's not appears to be unmotivated might be disengaged, might be, not feeling valued at work, or not realizing what their contribution is. Like, there's so many levels to that you're right. If you don't get curious, how do you really know what the issue is unless you ask, right?
Mhm.
These these assumptions are also what lead us to advice that doesn't work. And I think what I hear you saying is that the non-directive approach of coaching really invites the person to tell you what the issues really are for them, which the advice would never answer because it can't know. It's different for each person, and it's layered, right? Just like that, that symbol of the iceberg, and everything underneath is layered that we don't see and we don't interact with all the time, right? So curiosity is the only way to interact with what we don't see, right? And I
Absolutely.
feel, yeah, it's so great that you're doing this. And so what would you tell people who want to get into this space? Like, what would you say to them right now if you could offer one piece of advice, I guess, or guidance?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's number one is cultivating the basics of coaching, the fundamentals. It's, if you want to be an ADHD coach, you mentioned that people are reaching out asking if you have like an ADHD specific, course. And I certainly imagine that there's great information in whatever those courses that are available are. But I think that just that, the leadership and performance coach, or the life and wellness certifications, that anything that's giving you those frameworks and the basics and the fundamentals of coaching are going to make you a great coach. And that can be for ADHDers, that can be for autistic individuals, and people with OCD and what have you, all neurodivergent people. And then the second part would be then cultivating a greater understanding of that community. That's, like, I think any kind of niche, it has to be something that's, personal, and you kind of have that lens on the world of what's important to you, what you're bringing to that niche, so that you can hold space for this group of people. And I think that the best way to do that is to learn about this community. And I don't know if it's controversial or not, but I would say that social media is a wonderful way to do that. That's where people are sharing their stories. LinkedIn and Instagram are where I've followed some incredible influencers and content creators who are sharing their stories, and learned about their experiences. And you start to see themes. You start to gain a greater understanding and appreciation for these lived experiences. And I think, back to what I was saying before, that's really what's going to support, I think, a coach. It's what supported me in getting curious and holding that space and suspending the judgments that we have. Because when you see people having these different kinds of experiences, and we start to, kind of change our brain to understand and cultivate a different understanding of what's normal, what's acceptable, we can kind of expand our minds to hold that space better for these communities. And so really, really opening yourself up to learn from these folks with lived experience. But ultimately it comes down to being a great coach, just being great at the fundamentals, asking those powerful questions, getting curious, suspending that judgment. And actually something stood out about what you said, the not giving advice. This I think is this is just powerful in every way, not giving advice. But when we think of people with disabilities or ADHDers or things like that in particular, these are groups of people who receive just massive amounts more, substantially more negative messaging per day in their lives than neurotypical individuals. More likely to get fired, more likely to be punished in the classroom, told to sit down, be quiet, sent to the principal's office, so much negative messaging, and to be told what to do. And if we as coaches can create a space that is empowering, that's asking someone, what do you think? Like, what's your perspective? What's going on for you? That's going to be a really powerful shift where they've been, told what to do, that the way that they've thought about the world is wrong or unacceptable, or they should be ashamed of it. Coaching can be this really transformative experience where the ball's in their court. They are being empowered to take that responsibility and take those actions themselves. And I think that that's really transformative.
Yeah. And so when you're talking, I'm thinking about how we say in the program that coaching isn't learned in a book. It's not by reading theory. It's by being in the moment and figuring out what you're going to do with that one moment in the conversation. You're going to ask what question, or you're going to make an observation, or whatever you're going to do. But it's being live in those conversations that helps you get more skilled at having them, right? So I wonder if, it's just about like, I'm hearing you expose yourself to all kinds of different information, different clients, different opportunities to learn and experience that learning, right? Experience the framework in action. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you become. But I really feel like you need to just get out there and do it, right? And
Yes.
practice. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important point. I mean, you got to witness me really doing that in real time as I went through the course. I was actively coaching as I went through the course, actively fumbling and making mistakes, and I'm still learning. It's such a steep learning curve. I think coaching is this never-ending journey. I constantly have questions. I'm just, there are days where I feel like I have a great conversation with someone, and there are days where I'll have a coaching conversation and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just couldn't figure that one out. And that's so important. I totally agree. You cannot learn how to be a coach from a book. Of course, from our course, I learned, huge amounts from the course, but you have to coach. You have to coach so many different people, different experiences, different contexts. I think the coaching exchange is a great way to do that. But diving in, just coaching, it's really the only way. You absolutely cannot learn how to coach from a book. No, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I guess and that's important to think about when we know there's programs out there that are either not ICF accredited, or they are self-taught. And I feel there's a huge disservice done to the ones that are, ICF or not, if you're learning skills, you're learning a practice and a framework that you can build confidence from and apply. The accreditation for me obviously is very important, but I think if you can still skill yourself as a coach, that you're one step ahead. But those self-taught programs for me are doing a disservice to people because it's such an experiential thing to learn. Like, to hear the conversations, to hear the examples, to be in the space where you're getting live feedback, mentorship, the opportunities to engage with your peers and learn from each other. I think that you can't put a price tag on that, to be honest, because it's so valuable. And we see it over and over and over in our classes that people want to stay connected to that community because it's so enriching, right?
Oh,
What are your thoughts on, yeah, on that?
oh, I completely agree. That was exactly my experience. In
Yeah.
this, I feel so fortunate that I was actively coaching as I went through the course because week to week, we'd be taught something, an element of the framework, new concepts, and I'd come with these questions. I'd get
Yeah.
my coach
Yeah.
on and this is what's going on, and being able to brainstorm and ask those questions in real time, and being able to collaborate with other people. It was huge being able to apply that learning as I can't imagine doing that through a YouTube series or something like that. It's just because it's easy in that concept. I mean, if you understand learning and pedagogy and andragogy, and we know that that's just not how a person's going to learn how to do that. We don't learn how to drive a car by reading a book about it for a very obvious reason. And I think it's the same with coaching. You can't learn how to do that by watching a series of videos. Of course, that can play a component in it, learning from different kinds of experiences in that way. But you're gonna have to get your hands dirty, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely know it's the discomfort zone,
Yeah.
especially in adult learning. Like there's a lot of people who come and like, I haven't been in school for like 3 decades, and now here I am, and I'm really like, you can see the discomfort, right?
Yes.
But I think that's so wonderful. It's such a great commitment to a person's own development, and stepping into those discomfort zones, like, this is how we grow, right? This is the one chance we have in life to see what our full potential is, right? To really get to discover that.
Absolutely.
So if we think about, I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking that we're winding down, and I wanted to know, I love, first of all, seeing you come back into like the coach clinics and the coaching labs and all the ways that we try to keep the students connected. You brought a great case study to our last coach clinic, which I thought was fantastic. I'm wondering, what would you tell people about Canada Coach community, your experience with us, in your own words of like, what would you say was stood out for you, I guess?
Mm. Yeah, I think the community actually, like just right in your question. It's I was actually asked several months ago to connect with someone who is considering CCA, and I was more than happy to connect with them because I couldn't stop going on and on about how much I loved the program, everything about it, but especially the community. I still am connected to people from our class. We still communicate regularly. Two of us went through the kind of accreditation process together, and so that community has been really valuable. The coaching exchange, the opportunity to coach people who are part of CCA, is very beneficial. I love the resources in the classroom, and like you said, the events, the clinics, your office hours. There was just so many opportunities to practically talk about and apply what we were learning, which I think is so fundamental. And so I couldn't recommend it more highly. My experience was extremely positive. I think I was fortunate to be in a place, like I said, to be actively coaching through my full-time job. And so that really helped me. But my peer in the class, who was not in that same position, was able to also work very hard and take advantage of the coaching exchange.
Mhm.
And we both, basically end to end, were able to get our ACC certifications within about a year. and
Yeah.
from, you know, the starting the course to now. And so incredibly positive experience. You know, I could go on and on. It was
No, I
wonderful.
didn't pay you to do this.
Yeah,
Just
right. Yeah, unpaid endorsement, but it was incredibly positive, and I felt like all the resources and all the support. Because I think if you are really invested, and I mean, we said this even throughout the course, you get out of it what you put into it. And I
yeah.
think that that's just true of coaching, is if you are committed to this practice and you're committed to really serving the communities that you're working with and the people, your clients, and just constant improvement, it's like you're going to invest in that learning, and you'll find everything that you need within, I think, the Coach Academy, the Canada Coach Academy resources in the classroom and within the courses.
Mm. Well, I mean, it always really, it warms my heart to hear that that was your experience. And I hope that it's everyone's experience. That's my goal. But yeah, I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to talk with you. I know that it's a hot topic and on a lot of people's minds. And I'd love to, you know, after the podcast, we'll get your contact info and maybe people will reach out. I don't know, but it seems like there's so much to be discovered and appreciated and learned in this space. And I look forward to, you know, to hearing about your journey. And actually, I would just want to ask you, what's next for you? Like, what are your plans for coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do currently still work full time for a nonprofit, coaching neurodivergent individuals. And I also have my coaching and consulting business, The Low Achiever.
Oh,
And
yes.
and so people can look me up on LinkedIn or on my website, thelowachiever.com. And so I provide webinars and speaking events for organizations and groups that are interested in learning more about neurodiversity, and specifically I've conducted events on resilience and self-coaching skills for resilience and cultivating that, and folks who are looking for one-on-one coaching for being neurodivergent or otherwise, I'm available to support with that. But excited to expand that business. So always happy to talk to coaches who are interested in coaching neurodivergent people. So definitely feel free to reach out to Gill at The Low Achiever. But yeah, also connect on LinkedIn, and that's hopefully going to be a big part of this upcoming year.
Wow, amazing. I have to ask, like, what does that name mean for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, it came out of this kind of questioning that I had when I was interacting with different individuals in a period of time who were consistently describing themselves as high achievers. And I thought that was so interesting. It's very common. Lots of people identify with being a high achiever. And it just stood out to me because I had never identified that way. But you know, I'm always, you know, pushing myself and stepping outside of my comfort zone. But I found the phrase just really interesting. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually Googled, you know, low achiever. Like, what's a low achiever? Do people identify that way? Like, what, it must have an opposite. And it's really about this idea that our, you know, our achievements and the things that we strive for in our life are as meaningful as we make them, but they don't necessarily need to define us. We, you know, our achievements and the goals that we set, which are so fundamental to coaching, that's such a big part of coaching, is setting goals and, you know, reaching milestones and accomplishing things and achieving things. It's kind of, you know, putting that into a bit of perspective and thinking these things are important in whatever way we see them as being important, whatever meaning we apply to them and the value that we apply to them. And striving is a big part of being human and how we find purpose and fulfillment in our lives. But we can also find meaning and purpose in rest, and also in just understanding our own existence and just being, and that being human and we're more than our accomplishments. We're more than our achievements. And so it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek recognition of that.
No, I love it. I think it's very clever.
Thank
And I
you.
love that you Googled low achiever.
Yes, I was wondering, I'm like, do people identify with this? What's going on?
What did you get? Was there a definition for low
It-
achiever?
You know, it's funny, the only thing that really comes up is for young people not performing in expected ways in school
Oh,
are
interesting.
considered low achievers. And that's the kind of name that's given to them. So people who don't perform in the expected ways. And I think it's worth noting that it's usually only in English and math. We don't really call people low achievers when you don't perform well in art.
You
And
know
so
what I find interesting, and maybe I'm getting this wrong, but so you talked about high achiever as an identity, a self-identity, and yet low achiever is something people assign to us.
mm, yeah,
Isn't that kind of interesting? Whoa.
absolutely.
Okay. Well, we
Yeah.
could talk about that for a long time, but
Yes,
we'll,
yes.
we'll probably stop here. Well, thanks so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. I thought it was full of great gems, and I appreciate this time with you. And I hope you'll come back and see us.
Of course. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Natalie.
Thank you.